for having me today. You know, when I get asked to speak, I'm always really honored, and I love to speak at universities. And the way that I like to speak the most is really just to tell you a story. And so today you're going to hear a story of my life. And as you listen to that story, there are a few things that I want you to watch for that are kind of who I am. And they are, be confident and believe in yourself. That's a big thing to me. I have 4 kids, I'm always saying, the first thing you've got to do is believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, it's a big problem. Work hard. You can't get anywhere without working hard. If you think life's easy and you just coast through, it's not going to happen. Watch for opportunities. Opportunities come in times when you least expect it, and they're not always the best times. But when opportunities come, you got to step up and take them. And leave your options open. Just always do your best. If you do your best, your options are always going to be open. And make good decisions. Choose your life partner wisely. That's a funny one to talk about, but it's so important. If you choose to have a life partner, you want to make sure that you're aligned, that you all want to be and do the same things as best you can. Tell that. And balance doesn't happen day to day. So you can't look at your life any day and think, oh, I'm doing too much schoolwork and I'm not spending time with my family, or I'm not doing service enough. To me, if I can, when I'm 85 years old, look back and say, you know what, I helped the community, I raised a great family, I had a great career, I'm going to be happy. But any day to day, it's really hard to feel like you have balance. So here I go. Here's my story. So actually, not in 1960. In 1964, I was brought home to a trailer right next to the service station. And my dad was running the service station, and he owned this service station. And that's where I got my start. Our family was pretty typical. I just had one brother and my mom and dad. And the only atypical thing we probably did is my dad was a pilot, and his business was on the West Coast. So once in a while, we'd get in that plane and go to Disneyland, and we'd stay at Motel 6. And I felt pretty privileged. I thought life was pretty good. I grew up in Brigham City, Utah, mostly. You know, small town, just like here in Cedar City. Had a great life. When I was about 16, I decided that I wanted to get a job, and I went to my dad, who was working at Flying J, and we had service stations, and I said, I'd really like to come to work for the family business. And he said, well, you can't work for the family business. And so I went to McDonald's and got a job because I really wanted to be productive. I went to Utah State for a little while up in Logan. I know, a little competitive, but had a great time there for the first couple of years of college. And then I wanted to move out of state, and that is how I ended up graduating from Pepperdine. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing. I know a lot of you are in business and entrepreneurship, and that was what my degree was in also. And I went to work right after that, and that was the first time I did work for our family business, Flying J, in Brigham City, Utah. And I bought and sold like propane and butane for our refinery. And then I moved and did grand openings. We were opening truck stops across the country. And so I would go and put together the grand openings. So kind of a very different experience. And I was lucky enough, after a couple of years when I was 25, I was lucky enough to go to Harvard Business School in Boston. A great experience. As you guys are experiencing right now, education is an amazing time to learn and grow. And Boston was an amazing place to be. And then, after I graduated from Harvard, one weekend, I was living back east, and I was working, and I was 28 years old, and I wasn't married, and I had a great time. I lived in Stamford, Connecticut. I'd gone to New York City, and I was having a blast. And I mentioned to my dad that I might want to move west, because I was getting older, and maybe I should settle down a little bit. And I said, if you think of anything or have an opportunity, let me know. And I was invited to a wedding in Calgary, Canada. And I told my dad I was coming through Utah, through Salt Lake, and on my way to the wedding. I went to the wedding, and as the case, you should definitely go to weddings if you're looking for a spouse, because actually at the wedding, I ran into a classmate from Harvard. We actually had 3 classes together when I was at Harvard. Ironically, we'd had a class called Service Management, Entrepreneurial Finance, and Real Estate, all together. And we knew each other, but not really. But after that weekend, we got to know each other very well, and a year later, we got married. Well, I flew to Salt Lake, as I said, and my dad told me that he had bought some land in downtown Salt Lake, and that if I wanted to, I could come back and start a hotel. And ironically, when I was in high school and considering college, I had thought about getting a hospitality degree. So I was very interested. I also, in my job, living in Stanford, I traveled a ton and I stayed in a lot of hotels, and I figured that qualified me to be able to open and build a hotel. So I came back to Salt Lake, and my new husband, at the time my fiance, came with me, and we started building hotels. And the Crystal Inn opened in April of 1994, which is forever ago now, but it was a big success from the very start. My father was very good at choosing sites and real estate sites, and there was a big need for hotels. We then added, Flying J managed some hotels, and they allowed us to take on managing them. So very quickly, we had about 9 hotels that we managed. This was what our office looks like for all you entrepreneurs when we were trying to figure it all out and bring on all the hotels. Isn't that organized and so impressive? We had 5 employees. So then we started breaking ground on hotels, and I want you to just notice right here, I look a little different than maybe today. I hope I look a little different. So we actually, a few weeks later, had our first son, Drew, and we kept building hotels. And again, if you notice, maybe that black dress hides a little bit, but literally the next day after this ribbon cutting, we had another child, Lexi. And we didn't stop there. We kept building hotels. And the next time, they came in 2s. So by 2000, we had 14 hotels and 4 children that were 5 and under. Life was really good. So remember when I talked about balance? Can you picture what balance was like with that? 4 kids under 5 and 14 hotels. So my husband, when I talked about spouses being important, this was a business my husband and I ran. And it was a great business. It was very successful. It continues today. We still have it, as was mentioned. And this was our family. We got to do a lot of fun things. Life was really good. And I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to talk about my dad's business now, which is Flying J. But it started, as I mentioned earlier, it started on the West Coast because, ironically, my grandfather had died the year I was born in 1964 of a massive heart attack. My dad was 24 years old, and remember there was a Maverik, the first slide I showed when I said my dad owned that station? My grandfather and his uncle had joined together to start Maverik, and my dad went to work for about 4 years for Maverik. And he decided he didn't want to work there anymore, and so he wanted to go start his own company. He didn't want to compete with his uncle, and so that's why he would fly to the West Coast, California, Washington, and Oregon, and he would build self-service stations. That's where he got his first start. And he decided that if he was going to build service stations, he might as well carry the fuel, so he started a trucking company to carry the fuel to the service stations. Eventually, he bought refineries. He didn't buy enough refineries to supply all his fuel, but he bought a few refineries. And why not drill the oil that goes to the refineries that gets trucked to the stations? So by the early 80s, Flying J was a fully integrated oil company. And in 1979, one of the executives had a great idea to build a truck stop, which we called Travel Plazas in Ogden, Utah. And within the first year, even though I-15 isn't a really busy thoroughfare as it goes in the US, it was ranked the top 5 truck stop in the country. And my dad knew, and his executives knew, that they were onto something. So they started building truck stops across the country, and in addition to building truck stops, they started a lot of other businesses that related to the transportation industry, like a bank and lubes, and we built hotels for them. And the truck stops got better and bigger and more beautiful, and we got more of them across the country. And then in 2003, my dad passed away in an airplane crash. And I was very sad, obviously. He was 62 years old. It was very sudden. But we had a strong management team at Flying J, and this gentleman, Phil Adams' name, was running the company, and I felt very comfortable because Phil had been running the company for several years. My dad had kind of stepped back. I felt very comfortable that Flying J was in great hands and it would be fine. So after that, from 2003 to 2008, we made 2 acquisitions that weren't very core to our main business of being a truck stop company at that point. We bought a pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico called the Longhorn Pipeline, and we bought an additional refinery in California. But we did amazing. Nobody would have argued that Flying J wasn't doing amazing. We were almost 20 billion in sales, and we were the 15th largest private company in the country. What was I doing there? I was a member of the board, and I would go each month because I wanted to kind of understand what was going on. There was a monthly meeting with kind of about the same amount of people that are in this room, and people would stand up from each division and say what they did and were working on. And then there were around 12 divisions, so each year I would go to one of those divisions and have a more in-depth meeting with management to understand exactly what each division of the company was doing. But I didn't have any day-to-day responsibility at Flying J. So in December of 2008, and at this point, this is a long time ago, 10 years ago, close to 10 years ago, when oil, in July of 2008, and oil was $140 a barrel, which it isn't. Today it's like at 70. And from July to October, it dropped to $30 a barrel. And for a company like Flying J that had so many refineries and a pipeline and stations all over the country, that loss in inventory value was a huge catastrophe, and we were starting to run out of cash. So December 15th of 2008, I was out shopping. I was buying Christmas presents for my kids, and I was buying a wakeboard. And I will never forget when the phone rang, and our general counsel from Flying J said to me, we need to hire a bankruptcy attorney. And I said, what? I knew that Flying J was a little short on cash, but we were like a reputable company. Like how could this be happening? It couldn't be real that that was happening. But I went to work that day, and within 2 days, I flew back to New York City. I remember walking in my closet and to go on a red-eye flight and going, I wonder what they wear. Wondering if I still had a suit, and going back to New York. And while I was in New York, I ended up hiring attorneys, an investment banker, a PR company, so that we could go into bankruptcy. And free-fall bankruptcy for a company as big as Flying J was at that point was a very bad idea. Bankruptcies, and I didn't know, and I hope you guys don't know this, and I hope you never have to know this really, but when you do bankruptcy, a lot of times you see it coming and you prepare for it. But in this case, we did not, and that's why it was called free-fall bankruptcy, which meant our employees left on Friday. It was a Christmas holiday. I bet they celebrated, shopped, whatever over the weekend. They came back to work on Monday. They went into meetings to tell them that the company they'd worked for, many of them for many years, was in bankruptcy or filing that day. You cannot imagine the vendors calling them at that point, and all of a sudden, 3 days before Christmas, they were all working hard to keep Flying J afloat. And it was very admirable, and I was very impressed with everything they did, and they did an amazing job. We did not have we had to live on our cash flows from the refineries and the truck stops. So that meant that each day we would have to pay all our vendors up front. We had no more credit, which was very difficult to orchestrate. So what happened with me? So the day, like I said, I flew back to New York, and after that I started working every single day. I didn't have a role. So I would go and I would talk to all these division leaders that I knew. I'd try to help them and communicate as best I could what was going on. But 3 weeks later, the president that I showed you, the CEO, resigned. And we had hired somebody a week before who was called a chief restructuring officer. And they were supposed to come in and help us through this process. And when our current CEO resigned, all of the advisors around us that I'd hired in New York, the attorneys said, that's who should be CEO. And so I went to these division heads and said, Phil has resigned. This guy's going to come in as our new CEO. And they didn't get too worried about Phil resigning, but when I said this other guy was coming in, they would kind of get upset. And within a couple of days, very luckily for me, several of them got together and came to me and said, would you become CEO and help us get out of bankruptcy? And that's all I needed, is people to want me to do it, because I had goals about or the reason I started going to work at Flying J when this happened is I really wanted to pay people back. I wanted to save jobs. That was my biggest thing. I couldn't stand that my dad's business was in bankruptcy. It was the worst thing I could, it wasn't the worst thing, but it was not good for our family name. And my goal was to pay people back because I believed we had businesses that were still of value, that if I could start a restructure process, we would be okay. And that's what I did. One of the things I did is I got everybody together, again, about this amount of people in a room, and we did brainstorming about ways we could conserve cash. And it was a really good way to, even though it was a simple thing to do, it was a very good way to get a lot of ideas out there and make progress very quickly. One of the things a person did in that meeting is raise their hand and say, hey, we all wear ties here, can we quit wearing ties? And I said, yeah, take your tie off right now. And within 3 hours, all the ties were off in the building. And we were in the heat of bankruptcy, and people need a boost. This was a huge thing. And it's still known throughout our company that that's the day the ties went away. We had so many people, and here I was, basically kind of a stay-at-home mom. I had a great education. I had started Crystalline's, but in 2000, I basically had become a stay-at-home mom who went to Flying J meetings, a couple of Crystalline meetings, and all of a sudden, I was CEO of this business that had 11,000 employees and many, many advisors who were helping in the bankruptcy, because that's what happens. You end up hiring a lot of advisors. It was really hard to control them because they were all leaders and they understood bankruptcy a lot more than I did. And a very simple gesture made a huge difference, and that was really communication. And what it was is conference calls twice a week where everybody would get on the phone and talk about what they were working on so we could all stay on the same page. So as I mentioned, there was a slide a while back about 2 fatal acquisitions. And they were the 2 acquisitions that burned up a lot of our cash, and they were losing money. And in simple restructure terms, I wanted to get rid of the businesses that were losing money first. I had no interest in keeping them. So we put the Longhorn Pipeline up for sale. Another very small business we had was exploration and production, and it was not losing money, but it wasn't a huge moneymaker. Ironically, you put a creditors committee together. When you're in bankruptcy, you don't put it together, but the receivers, the court puts it together. And one of the people on that creditors committee was in the exploration and production business and kind of got the committee to demand that I put this up for sale because I think they believed they could get it for pennies on the dollar. They did not get it, and it ended up in an auction, which everything in bankruptcy ends up in an auction. It ended up in an auction on the courtroom steps in Delaware, and we got a great price for the exploration and production company. So one day, one of our competitors, Pilot, they had truck stops all over the country too, and the gentleman was named Jimmy Haslam. They had their family owned this business, the Haslams, and Jimmy had been wanting to talk to me a lot once we went into bankruptcy. And we also were in a lawsuit with them, so I was advised, don't talk to him. But he kept trying and trying. He's very persistent. And so finally I agreed. I met him in a restaurant, and the restaurant had a paper tablecloth, and he sat down, and we were 6 months into the bankruptcy, so I had been CEO for about 6 months, and he started outlining on the tablecloth what he would do if we joined our 2 companies together. And really the retail part of our company, so the truck stop piece, not the oil refinery and bank and other things. And so I was very impressed because everything he said he wanted to do were things that I saw we needed to do and I knew would make a huge difference, but I couldn't do them in bankruptcy. So I knew, or I believed, he would be an amazing business partner. And suddenly I saw the light at the end of the tunnel in a way that I could pay people back 100% in the bankruptcy. So we decided to do a deal. We decided to merge our companies together. The great part about it is this deal would allow me to take just enough cash out to pay people back, but would still allow me to be a minority owner. The sad part about it is that our employees in our headquarters, about 200 employees, would likely lose their jobs, but around 10,000 would have a bright future. So we're going to put our companies together, and we had to get Federal Trade Commission approval because we were like the 1 and 2 biggest truck stop companies. But we only had about 450 truck stops across the country together, and there were like 5,000 truck stops. So we didn't see this as an issue, but the Federal Trade Commission did. So we ended up needing to wait because they just kept pushing it out, and they weren't going to approve it. And during that time, we actually did end up signing our deal in December of 2009, but we still had to wait because we couldn't actually close officially until we got FTC approval. So during that time, the Bakersfield Refinery also sold, which was good. And our North Salt Lake Refinery, in bankruptcy, they want you to put everything in your company up for sale. And of course, I did not want to do that, especially after I knew we had a way with the pilot deal to pay everybody back. And so I didn't need to put the refinery up for sale. And the banks, the very banks that had put us into bankruptcy, were back and willing to refinance, to give us financing on the refinery so that we could keep it. So you're a year into bankruptcy, the businesses are operating really well. We now have plenty of cash. We actually put together, our executives put together a business plan that if we don't have pilot, that we can go forward. It doesn't look nearly as good as if we have pilot, and we're just kind of waiting around. But it does finally all come together. We had to sell some travel plazas. We got FTC approval. As I mentioned, the Bakersfield Refinery sold. And in July 2010, 18 months after filing for bankruptcy, we came out of bankruptcy. We paid 5,775 claims, and it was close to $2 billion back to people, which was what we owed them plus interest. When I took the job back in January, a year and a half before, I knew of about $400 million. I had no idea until everything was done and the dust was settled and we'd actually paid out this amount of money that we came up with that dollar amount. And it still blows me away today, honestly. So, where are we today? So today, and as we came out of bankruptcy, I mentioned we kept the Big West Refinery. It's in North Salt Lake, and it's a very small refinery as refineries go, but it's a great refinery. We had $375 million in debt on it when we came out of bankruptcy, and we were very lucky. Within a year and a half, we were debt-free. We still have the refinery today. It's a great asset. We had a bank. It was an industrial bank when we came out of bankruptcy. Today, it's a community bank. It's one of our smaller businesses. It's located in Ogden. It does things like truck leases and factoring, which are very specific to the trucking industry. When we came out of bankruptcy, we had a 50% ownership in our credit processing company called TCH. After we came out, we merged with EFS. And in 2013, we decided it was a great time to sell. We sold the business for 15 times EBITDA, which was a huge number to me. And I was able to take some of the stock in that company and put it in what's called a donor advisory fund, which has helped us a lot with our charitable giving. It gave us a very big platform for things like scholarships here. And Pilot Flying J. We still own 17% of Pilot Flying J, which has performed magnificently together. Together, it's a much stronger and better business than it was with just the two of us being apart. And so I was very fortunate to have been able to keep some ownership in Pilot Flying J. But the Haslams, who I thought wanted to have their family business forever, about a year ago, they started talking to this guy. And the Berkshire Hathaway and Warren decided he was going to get good value by buying Pilot Flying J. And so we negotiated a deal. I did not. I talked to Warren once, but we negotiated a deal to sell Pilot Flying J to Warren Buffett. But it's a stage deal, so we've only sold a third of our ownership, and then in 2023 we sell the rest. So the Flying J retail stores will not be under our family business as of 2023. But it's been a great business for us. So in 2012, we had, as I've described, we had all these businesses and they were doing really, really well. And what I wasn't necessarily so good at is figuring out how to deploy cash. We were in a really great situation. We had a lot of cash. And one day I went to lunch with my cousin, and he informed me that they might be selling Maverik. And I said, "What? I told you if you sold Maverik, come to me." And he said, "Well, I just thought, you're only 2 years out of bankruptcy. I thought you'd have a ton of debt, and there's no way you could ever buy Maverik." And I said, "No, we need to buy Maverik, and please sell us Maverik." And So they did. And if you remember at the beginning of my story, I talked about how my dad went to work for the family business when his dad died, which was Maverik. So our side of the family had sold out in 1976, but this brought it back full circle to our side of the family when we bought Maverik in 2012. I hope you've noticed, but we've built about 100 stores since then. We're up to about 325 stores. We've remodeled about 80 stores. So, and thank you. And to all of you that raised your hand, we appreciate it. We love the brand, and we're excited. That's a business that we're growing. And my husband actually is CEO of Maverik. So that's what he does now. So after we came out of bankruptcy and we bought Maverik, and I was trying to figure out, like, what is our mission at FJ now? We changed our name to FJ Management. You know, we no longer controlled the truck stops. We had a convenience store company, a bank. We still had the hotels. You know, what is going to be where we want to be? And we came up with building value to last, which means a lot to me because I really want to have a business into the future. And there's a lot of reasons I want to have a business into the future. And one of the biggest reasons is, yes, I would love it if my children, which would be third generation, one or some of them ran the businesses. But more importantly, I love having families work with our family. I love to have companies that provide careers for people. And as you think about business ideas and into the future, I encourage you to dig deep in your heart about why you want to be an entrepreneur. Because one thing that I've learned is that, yes, it's great to have money, that's awesome, but there's a whole nother side to having a business that you add to the economy, people have jobs, you help families. And one thing that I am not a big fan of is the way businesses are sold, and that doesn't help people's career in the long run. And some people get rich very quickly, but to me, building value to last means you want to have something for a long time. You don't just want to build something and hurry and sell it and make a bunch of money. But as you think about that, think about what you really want for your life as you approach your entrepreneurship. So we did end up with, as I said, a lot of cash. And so we also have an investment arm in our company where we do invest in private equity funds and the public markets. And what's really exciting to me now that we're working on, that is the most entrepreneurial thing we're doing, is because petroleum, many would argue, is a dying industry, it's probably not a growth industry. I feel like if I really want to have a generational business, I need to figure out something else for us to deploy capital into that diversifies us, that could become as big as our petroleum holdings over a period of time. So we decided to invest in what we're calling geriatric services, which is things for the aging population. So we have partnered with two different groups of people. We found individuals who were entrepreneurial, who had years of experience in building psych hospitals, which are small hospitals for elderly that have depression and things like that. And then WellQuest Living is a company that builds assisted living, active adult apartments, residential type places. So it is my hope that we can, over time, and it's going to be a long time, build these businesses up to be as big as our petroleum holdings. So this is just to illustrate really how different our company is today. We had 16,000 employees in 2006. Today we have 6,100. We had 13 billion in sales. We're at 3 billion, but the bottom line is bigger, and that's what makes me happy. In the day when Flying J had that employees and had those sales, we were on all the lists. I don't even know if we're on a list now because it's not important to me. What's important to me is that bottom net income, because I know that if I'm making net income, that our business is sustainable and that we're going to be around. So I don't really care what that revenue is because I want to be around and I don't want to be on all the lists necessarily. So I think we're back to where, I forgot. So this is my husband, and I had said that choosing your partner wisely is important. And I do, when I come to groups like this, I do like to emphasize that because 25 years ago this year, I married Chuck. He's been by my side through all of this. We did the Crystal Inns together. He helped me during bankruptcy. He had to play a lot bigger role at home during bankruptcy, and then when we were finished with bankruptcy, he was able to come in to work with me at FJ Management as Chief Operating Officer. After we bought Maverik, we were around it for a couple years, and he loved it so much we decided it would be great if he became Chief Adventure Guide, which is CEO of Maverik. So he went to do that 2 years ago. But it has been very critical for me to do what I've done, to have him supporting me, especially with 4 kids, and to be on the same page. So I just always like to give a plug. Just be very careful about who you select to spend your life with. This is our family today, basically the owners of our business. These are our twins. That's Chuck, my husband. It's my older daughter who is at USC. These two just started at Notre Dame. And my son got married this summer. He is at Zions Bank, graduated from the University of Miami, and his new wife, Monet, is a school teacher in Salt Lake. The rest are my extended family, niece and nephews. But we hope, as a family, that we can take this family business in the future, but it's going to require the help of many, many people, because as you can see, our family's really not that big for a business as large as ours. So with that, I'm back full circle. I'll go through them quickly. Be confident and believe in yourself. Work hard and always do the best you can. Watch for opportunities and prepare to take them. Leave all your options open. Choose your life partner wisely. Balance doesn't happen day to day, but over a lifetime. And I hope as I've given you the speech, and now you see those again, that you can see within my life that this is how I view life to some degree. So I think we have a lot of time for questions. I think that's what we're to. So hopefully, anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
So when I was looking at, me and my mom were talking, because I didn't believe that Maverik was owned by the same people that owned Plaza and stuff. So we were talking, she's like, well, Maverik has such a different marketing scheme. They're more towards like the family, the people like us, you know,
right.
Instead of like the big old truckers like So we were just talking, and why did you go that route instead of like trying to stay like a trucking company?
Well, I mean, that happened a little bit by Flying J's. I knew were located on the interstates, and you know, and when we were still partners with Pilot, I had a non-compete for one thing, and I knew I had a lot of ownership of Pilot Flying J. So the truck stops were there. When we bought Maverik, the people who were running Maverik, my cousins, had already coined Adventure's First Stop, which is, you know, the adventure theme, which goes well with this school. And they had built a brand, and honestly, I had not really understood the brand. I mean, I knew Maverik, like you all know Maverik, but I didn't really understand at all the following that we had. And I can take really no credit for what you just described, other than recognizing that what they had and the direction they were going, we needed to just build more and continue that and remodel stores, and so that people felt like they weren't coming into truck stop. We do have a couple Maveriks that are on the interstates, Fillmore, which many of you might have been to, and we have some trucking islands, but we really do, I mean, you guys are our customer, so, and we really do want to appeal to the general public. That is what we're trying to do, and it's a safe, friendly place for you guys to all stop. So that's kind of, I just stuck with the strategy is kind of what I did, and didn't try to change it to something that I was more familiar with, honestly. I mean, truck stops would have been more familiar to me at the time, but I thought we had a good thing going, and I kind of got to be in both, so that was good. That was a good question. Go ahead.
Just going into a little bit more detail with that meeting with Haslam. I mean, at that point, from his perspective, or it just looks like, you know, you guys are kind of on your knees in bankruptcy, and he's your competitor coming to talk to you. How was that talking with him, and like, what was the point that you realized he wasn't trying to absorb you, but actually help you guys as a competitor?
You know, I think that is a really, really good question and very insightful, because that was very key to our negotiations, because he was a Southern gentleman to me. He really was, and I didn't trust him. He had to get my trust, but he was very convincing, and I watched the things that he said and what he did, you know, and he always kept his word, and I had to trust him, you know, and we all have to trust people, and unfortunately it doesn't always turn out that well, but I really, even that day, we spent about 3 hours together, and I really felt like, I knew he wanted to partner with Flying J, and I knew, I mean, he really is a competitive person. He actually owns the Cleveland Browns now, which is kind of killing him, but they won a game last week. But anyway, he really wanted Flying J. And I'm sure behind the scenes, I still wonder, I've never really asked him, but he just believed that I could move the deal away from him. So he wanted it so badly that he kept his word even through the FTC dealings, and he kept his price because he could have. There's so many things as a competitor at the time. He could have lowered prices on the street across the country, and we were making money, and it was really important for us to make money in bankruptcy, and if he would have lowered his prices, we would have needed to lower ours. I mean, there's all kinds of strategies, and he chose not to. He chose to, be a very ethical business person, which I admire, and he won because of it. Because the company really, I was looking at the other day, our combined EBITDA together, the day we did the deal, was about, I think, 600 million, and today it's 1.3 billion. So that's what he got. That was his reward for being ethical, and I don't know if he would have been able, I don't know what would have happened. There were so many people involved. If he had tried to do it in a different way, it wouldn't have been so sure that he got it anyway, but he just wanted to make sure he got it, so he's going to be really fair about it. He's a great businessman today, and we're good friends, so. You had one more, yeah, and then we'll come back here.
I'm just curious, you touched on this briefly, but with the rise of electric vehicles, how do you see that really affecting your industry and business?
Think about that a lot, but the really interesting statistic that Chuck, my husband, tells me is we actually put in some charging stations down in St. George. And so on an average day to Maverik, we have around 1,400 to 1,700 people get fuel, an average Maverik, okay? At the electric charging station in St. George, we have 8 people a month use it. So, people can charge their car other places, but, I think really the bigger threat, and this is a big threat, is energy efficiency. So, the cars get more and more efficient and they use less fuel. We view that, hybrid cars, we view that as more of a risk than electric at this point. That could change, but we are, I think our world will change. Every business is in, there's a lot of disruption going on, and so we are really trying to get better at food service, honestly, because we understand we have convenient locations and that fuel could go away. So we want to get better and better at food. So that's what we're trying to do. But it's coming.
Follow up with that question. Is your bonfire businesses showing profit? Are they growing?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think they're more challenging than the fuel, but yeah, they are. We do about 50% of our business in the store and 50% with fuel. So, and the margins in the store are fine. They're good. But it's a tough industry, though. There is a lot of competition. So, but yeah, I've got to go right there first.
I was wondering where your headquarters or your office is, what kind of work environment you kind of do.
That's a good question. My office is in downtown Salt Lake, in a building that has a big red band on it and says Maverik Base Camp. And I am on the top floor of that building. And, I think our environment is actually changing over time. But, if you go to the Maverik floors, it's actually a little scary because you'd see a lot of people. No, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, everybody would be dressed like you guys, and then you'd get off, and how our stores look, the decor in our stores. Every floor is different, and it's actually a really cool environment that way. It's very casual, and then you get to my floor and it's more stuffy. No one wears ties, of course, but it's a little stuffier. But I really try to foster a work environment that people feel like they can speak up and they can be trusted. That's a big deal to me. If people don't feel like they can speak up, or if somebody's managing them in a way that is condescending. I'm a big believer in teamwork, and I certainly would not be where I am if I hadn't been surrounded by a lot of smart people. And so I really try, kind of tone at the top to emphasize to people how important it is to work together. And I kind of skipped over it on that building value to last slide, but we actually have 3 guiding principles at our company: integrity, mutual respect, and excellence. And all of those are important, but mutual respect is one that I feel extremely strongly about. And I want to stay approachable to people, and I want everybody to work well together and respect each other. And more, there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ways people like to work. I mean, I have a guy who, his wife had twins, and she is a resident at the University of Utah, and he stays home with the kids a couple days, and we let him work at home, and he comes into the office. I mean, that kind of stuff's starting to happen too, which I like. I think that's kind of cool. So, Brian, did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like industries and markets just change so quickly nowadays. How do you, as the CEO, stay on top of those changes to, maintain that competitive edge?
Well, I think I'm lucky. I say our businesses are a bit meat and potatoes. So every business has technology, right? I mean, every business has technology, but we aren't a technology company in the sense that we have to keep recreating ourselves as quickly. I mean, I do believe that, I don't want to have my head in the sand, but I think that we are a little bit more of a business that is a little bit more consistent in the service industry. And one of the reasons that we chose to go into the geriatric service is because if you really look at our history, hotels, convenience stores, truck stops, we've done real estate and service. And so going into that business, building senior apartments, it's real estate and service. So I don't feel like I have to be quite as out there from a technical point of view. Certainly we use a lot of systems, right? At our businesses that are technical in nature, and we have to keep on top of that. But that's good.
Consistency.
Right. But customer service is, you can provide customer service and use technology and faster service, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, most people, you want to have somebody be friendly and check you out and say hi and get you through the line quick and clean restrooms, and it's not rocket science, kind of. So I'll just go down here first.
So when you were going through the whole bankruptcy thing and everything, did you ever have like a plan B? Did that ever go through your mind, or where you were like, I'm going to save the company, or?
Yes, we had a lot of partners around us. ConocoPhillips actually was part owner in the retail that we sold to Pilot. So they were always back here like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I just always believed that we had enough value in our businesses that we would figure it out. And plan B was kind of to keep running and try to refinance the whole company, or, but that wasn't a very good plan B. I don't think it would have turned out the way the plan A turned out. But yeah, we had to constantly think about it. And when it looked like the Federal Trade Commission might not approve our sale, I kind of glossed over this, but I brought together a lot of executives from Flying J and young executives, middle manager people, and they created a business plan that was Plan B. So it was kind of hard for them when the deal went together, honestly, because they had put together this whole Plan B, business plan, and it was sad, but many of them got opportunities. Ironically, a lot of our people are back at Maverik. It's kind of fun to see them come full circle. We've been able to hire a lot of the old Flying J people back at Maverik. So there's a few more questions over there. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for inspiring talk.
Sure.
What role, if any, did the inheritance tax play in the decision to sell Island Flying J?
I don't think it played very much, because I think the Haslams just looked at it and said, we probably won't run this business, someone in our family, long term. And looking at that petroleum is not necessarily a growth industry. So I think they looked and said, we'd like to own this about 5 more years-ish. And Warren was willing to do a deal like that. And that had drove their decision a lot more than any tax sort of things. Because they really, I think, wanted to monetize, but they didn't want to monetize today. But they wanted to know they had a buyer who could still afford all the things that you would think Berkshire Hathaway hopefully can bring to the table. So they structured the deal around that. Go ahead.
It seems like you had to make a lot of decisions throughout everything. So do you have any tips and tricks for making stressful decisions in life?
I do. You just have to make them and not look back. That's it. Because you really do. Life is all about decisions. And it's like, all you can do is make them, and maybe they're bad decisions sometimes, and then you learn and you apologize to who you need to apologize if you hurt someone in that bad decision, and you learn and you go forward, and if they're good decisions, that's awesome. But you can't be paralyzed by not making a decision because you're worried what the outcome will be. You know, I mean, you have to just get the facts as best you can. We did a lot of case study at Harvard Business School, and I think that is the biggest preparation I had for the Flying J days, because literally all I did is make decisions in my role. So I had people would come in like a case study, and they'd say, okay, this, what do you want to do? Do that, you know, this, and so it's like I had to really be used to being presented with facts and just saying, well, given that, go this way, and not looking back. And I think, you know, you want to do your homework. I mean, it's not like you just want to not be educated in your decision. But, you know, once you make it, don't wait to make it when you have all the facts. And once you make it, don't look back and beat yourself up if it could have been a different decision. That's. Go ahead.
Do you have any PR issues with your rapid growth and so many stores so quickly, since you're lots of people over the Maverik side of things?
You know, not so far. I think that, you know, people still, I think, want employment and things that new businesses bring. So I think that that's why. And also, you know, we can be just a convenience store. We don't have to have fuel. So I don't think that people are really that upset that we're building service stations, or convenience stores. Go ahead.
So I've noticed with like some of the other Mavericks, you have like partnered with like Cinnabons, like we call them the good Mavericks, Mavericks, because we love Cinnabon.
Cinnabon, right.
Go in and smoke it. How was that decision? Did you do that decision while it was under yours?
Yes, we did. We did. That was actually a good example of, so Pilot Flying J had put Cinnabons into the truck stops. And so we knew how they were performing. And I went to an event at Pilot Flying J where they talked about it. And I was like, hey, why can't we have those at Maverik? Who's the contact at Cinnabon? And that's where that came from. So I stole it from Pilot Flying J. Yep, that's.
I'm just curious, how did the whole you guys getting involved with the Maverik Center become a thing, and how has that affected your business as a whole?
It really is just a sponsorship. We don't own it or anything. And so it's just another advertisement, I would say. So I wouldn't say it's been a huge impact on our overall business. You know, we enjoy the partnership, but it's not something that's very key to us. We pay out to have it. You know, it's not any sort of revenue, so to us.
I am so sorry. I'm going to jump in
Yeah.
here. Because if I don't, they'll never let you.
No, it's fun to answer questions.
In recognition of the astounding generosity you have with your time and coming down here, we'd like to present you with the Thunderbird
Well,
Award.
thank you.
And
Nice.
thank you again for coming to Southern Utah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.